So welcome, I'm Tammy Rosen, and I do work at Apple. I'm a faculty member at Apple University, and I have the privilege, and I just feel thankful to be on the stage with Dean Kamen, who I got to meet way back when in 2001, working at a small financial firm called Goldman Sachs, where we helped to bring his first New York robotics group to the Jacob Javits Center. So today, it's great to be back here and supporting Apple, but also working with FIRST and getting to know Dean. So while you heard from Elizabeth that segue is what he's known for, Dean is known for so much more. He is a serial inventor, a philanthropist, a successful entrepreneur. He's a tireless advocate for science and technology literacy and education. But that's not even his day job. His day job is the president and founder of DEKA Research and Development in New Hampshire. And they create first of their kind medical devices like, oh, I realize we don't have the clicker. Sorry about that. Like the insulin pump, the stent, the prosthetic arm, and also the iBot, which is an all-terrain wheelchair. And what we don't realize about Dean is he'll tell you his day jobs really fund his fantasies and his real interests and passions in helping to supply developing countries with clean water and portable electricity, as well as supporting our youth in science, math, and technology through his philanthropy called FIRST. And we're going to hear more about that today with over 1 million participants to date. So when Dean visited Apple last year, he told us that his innovations are driven by a very deceptive, oops, we're going too fast, a very deceptive question: is there a better way? And that question has riddled him since he was 5, creating an automatic bed-making system to please his mother, true story, and has also riddled him even today as he continues to think about what we could do next. So welcome, Dean, to the stage, and looking forward to hearing about some of the key challenges of being an inventor at DEKA. And I know, as you could see, all the great things, oh, they haven't put it on the board yet. There you go, thank you. These are all the great inventions that DEKA has done. And can you tell us about some of the challenges you face, given you invent, but you don't distribute and you don't market?
Well, I think Gideon summed a lot of it up, although he's obviously just a young kid, because he only had 5 no's before his yes. And he said the no's are always followed by a comma. The no's I get are followed by exclamation points, like no, absolutely, positively no, get out of here, you're crazy, no. But I've learned over my lifetime to run back to my engineers. They say, how did it go? I say, well, it was a definite maybe. I think the way we do things in some ways is harder than what most companies do, little startups, because typically they control what they do, how they do it, then they try to bring it to the market. They may succeed, they may not. We work on stuff that most of the big companies would say we're crazy to try to do. They wouldn't try to do it. Most of the time, sadly, they're right. But every once in a while, something comes along that we've taken and we think we've de-risked that technology. That technology could be so powerful if properly deployed that it would work. Then we go to the big guys, but now we have to depend on them to share the vision and have the courage. And what they really bring to the table typically is global reach, but you have to convince them to help, and sometimes that's pretty hard. That dialysis machine down in the corner there, we went to a company and that was the major leader in the world at what they do, and do it in centers where patients are humiliated and left chronically sick but kept alive. Patients, when I started doing that, used to say to me, people think dialysis is a great triumph. But then they would talk to me and say, after 4 years on this machine, living every other night in the center, they'd say, this wasn't a way to extend my life, this was a way to extend my death. So we went back and said, we're gonna wipe that system out and make a device that you could sit at the bedside of with dignity and privacy, do it every night so you're more dialyzing. We were told, no, you can't. We've shipped 500 million therapy cassettes for that thing now, and it went from being indefensible to being indispensable. It's now a standard of care, and we have a great partner, and a lot of these other projects went through that same process. But you got to learn to deal with a lot of failures and a lot of frustration, and that's just the way life is.
Well, I want to get to the topic of water, because I know water is so important to you, and you have a famous quote of saying that 50% of all human disease would be eradicated, as well as 50% of all hospital beds would be emptied if there was clean water. And you've created a machine, which we have a picture of, called the Slingshot. And this machine is pretty standalone, very interesting. Probably took you how many years to invent? About 15?
From a technology point of view, it's a little miniature vapor compression distiller. And it was really simple to make a machine that's 50 times as energy efficient as a still that'll take any water, whether it's toxic waste, cryptosporidia, bioburden, or other organics, or whether it's inorganics like hexvalent, chrome, and arsenic in 1.5 million wells in India. It was an instant overnight success that after about 11 years, it was working fine. And it's a little device. It weighs a couple of hundred pounds, the size of a dorm room refrigerator. And it works. The problem we had with that was most of my 30 years worth of medical partners and clients do have global reach into the global wealthy societies, the ones Europe and, as you can imagine, North America and Japan. They sell in 80, 90, 100 countries. These are giant companies. But there are 206 countries on this planet recognized by the United Nations, and about 100 of them are not really accessible very effectively to most of these companies. So the problem there was, how do I turn that science fair project into something that might really help? And there's one giant company out there that if you can buy a product of any kind, it's theirs, and that's Coca-Cola. That's why in the slide just before that you saw there was a little machine in the corner, which is their freestyle machine. We used our medical technology to design for them a machine that would make any one of their 126 beverages in real time. But we did it because their chairman, Muhtar Kent, had promised me that if we more than meet his expectations using, frankly, our medical mixing, measuring, controlling technology to build him that machine, he would at least try to help us find a scalable way to put those water machines around the world. And we met his expectations, and he helped us. There he is. The only thing he requested was make the machine red. We did. That's, by the way, Will, I am there with him. That's at the Olympics where we were showing off the first ones. But from that date, he put machines in Ghana, South Africa, Paraguay, Mexico. We've produced hundreds of thousands of liters of clean water. And very recently, about a month ago, I'm sitting at my desk, sort of minding my own business, and I get a call from the Rubicon people. If you don't know, these guys are unbelievable. They're veterans. You heard some stories this morning about helping a lot of these displaced guys that have extraordinary skills. They've spent a year or two in Afghanistan or Iraq. They're really good at stuff that none of us want to do, but that skill set isn't very valuable here to get a job. But they realized they could band together, form a not-for-profit, Rubicon, and they go into places that none of us would want to go after the tsunami or you name it, and try to help and restore order and stability. And they do this as essentially a volunteer philanthropic thing. It's their skill set. Well, I get a call from their founder who said, Dean, we're in Dominica, and we can bring a lot of stuff in, and we've got little villages, and things are stabilizing now after the floods. He says, but there's absolutely no clean water, and that's not something you can haul up to these villages. The stuff weighs 62 pounds per cubic foot. We need 1,000 gallons a day to keep these villages going. Our own teams are getting sick. We're going to have to leave. The kids here are sick. You got to get us some of these machines, and we need them now. I hang up. I'm sitting in Manchester. I call a good friend who's helped us with FIRST every year. He delivers every robot package everywhere in the world to every team free. That's FedEx. So I call Fred Smith, and he gets on the phone. You know, he's 71. He says, Dean, it's October. Isn't this a little early for that robot stuff? I said, Fred, this is about the robots. He says, what's up? I said, I got to get 3 of my machines right away to Dominica. Where are they? Well, they're up here. They send one of their big machines. They put it in one of their little caravans, and 12 hours later, they send me some pictures back of the machine. Well, that's Dominica. 12 hours later, that plane delivered 3 of these machines. 12 hours after that, we were making 1,000 gallons of fresh water a day, and as we sit here today, we're making 1,000 gallons of water. We got those village people have all the water they need.
Well, I love that story, but one of the things thinking about the Social Innovation Summit that really struck me when I first learned about your water machines years ago was the story in Honduras. And the story about taking a water machine, and we're going to talk about it shortly, your portable electricity machine, and putting it into a village that had nothing, and how that really transformed that village. But then it had this wonderful unintended consequence of kids going to school. So can you just tell that story? Because I think it's wonderful to see how this kind of innovation can change the lives of many.
Whenever you go out and test beautiful theories, and I love beautiful theories, you typically get ugly facts. And ugly facts always win. No matter how beautiful the theory is, I'm an experimental physicist at heart. The facts win. You go out and do trials and you find out it didn't work, or the people didn't like this. Well, by the third week of that initial trial, yep, they liked it. What we did is we gave, well, with Coke, we gave the machines to a village. They put them in the schools, and they said the kids every day could come home with a 5-20-liter, a 5-gallon jug of water. And after a few days of this, all of a sudden, we're told, we got some pictures I could show you, there's all sorts of little girls going to school. Now, down there, typically, the girls didn't go to school. I mean, why should they? Girls can't learn anything anyway. But anyway.
Tell that to Hannah.
Yeah. So I asked somebody, what's going on? I said, well, after a little while, all the moms and dads realized all I got to do to get twice as much fresh water here is send my daughters to school with my sons. And so one of the unintended consequences was now all the kids there are going to school and everybody's healthy. And it worked.
Great story. So these water machines can't operate on their own, clearly. So you have that other box that usually sits right next to it, your portable electricity machine.
Well, what we're very proud of about that little box was, A, it's very robust in terms of most ways you can remediate water. You need to know what's wrong with the water. If it's bioburden, use chlorine. If it's hexavalent chrome, use activated charcoal. If it's salt water from an ocean, use osmosis membranes. But you need to do a whole lot of testing, and you need some pretty sophisticated stuff. Most of the smart people in this room couldn't run a municipal water system. You have to pre-check it and post-check it, and sometimes even though you make it potable, you wouldn't give it to your dog. It looks filthy, it looks bad, but I put chlorine in it. I know there was nothing in it but bioburden, but now it still looks and smells bad, and it's got chlorine in it. You wouldn't drink it, it's safe, but well, what we said is we got to make a box so simple that its instruction manual is you put the big hose in anything that looks wet, and out of the other hose comes water that'll meet the U.S. Pharmacopoeia standard for water for injection, the gold standard. It's distilled. The trouble is it takes a lot of power. Now, we solved that problem by recirculating all the energy. That's what took all the time. It takes less power than a handheld hairdryer to make 1,000 liters a day. So while the machine can go anywhere and it's robust because it doesn't need any chemicals, any filters, any membranes, anything, it needs one thing: electricity. Not much, but some. But we decided that well over 1 billion people around the world that don't have clean water also don't have electricity. So if you got to go through all the work to get there, the marginal extra cost of bringing a second box, a little Stirling electric generator, shouldn't be so hard. The killer app for it is to run the water machine, but it can also supply electricity for everything else people need, like their phones and their lights and their computers. So we spent another decade building a miniature Stirling electric generator. We were doing them simultaneously. We went to Bangladesh with 2 of these. We ran 2 villages for 6 months off these generators, and the only fuel that went into them was methane gas coming out of a pit full of cow dung. And by the way, we were sucking up the methane, CH4, burning it to run the Stirling, turning it into CO2, which would become anyway. But we did that very quickly because if you let the methane, which is lighter than air, go off, it's 21 times as bad as CO2 as a greenhouse gas. So we think of our little machines as environmental vacuum cleaners that take the bad stuff, turn it into electricity, run the water machine, and give people some power. Yeah. And we did that for 6 months in Bangladesh, and neither machine had a hiccup, which is more than Con Ed can say these days. So.
Certainly. So, but you have a passion around power and what you think is really the next big innovation, and this is just the tip of the iceberg with this hopeful appliance in everyone's home. So do you want to talk about how you see the vision of what this could do for our grid, for the future?
Well, the fact is that water machine also might be somewhat useful here as time goes by, because we're being water stressed as well. We're not immune to it. The
Especially here in California.
And the electricity, well, we can't make the quantities you need for things like farming, but the idea that 50 million people now move to a place that they knew in the start 100 years ago was a desert, and then used it for farming, which is the most water-intensive thing you... Only California. But anyway,
Those damn almonds.
So this little Stirling device, which we intended to be base power and prime power around the world, as we started it, we realized that we got a grid in this country that's pretty old and pretty... I mean, these 4 pictures show the best of the U.S. power system. That thing up there is burning. We'd make about 50,000 megawatts from coal, then we put it up to